You now are listening to the audio podcast of Prisoners of Hope, the antidote to what ails your heart. I'm your host, Dr. Deborah Whitson. So come on in, pull up a chair, and open up your mind as you get ready to receive the download that hope will bring. Well, hey, welcome to the podcast today. Prisoners of Hope is glad to have you here. Today, I have a real special, treat for you where I'm interviewing somebody I know very well. I'll let him introduce himself in a second. And he has a very, very common demeanor most of the time, and I'm more excited. So I want to interview him about how did he get this demeanor, and was he born with it or what happened? So welcome, Ed Whitson.
Hey,
Hi,
babe.
Ed.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing fine. um, were you always calm like this? Because you tend to be very, very calm most of the time.
No,
Okay,
not really.
can you tell us about that journey? Because that's before I met you, right? Way before I met you.
No, when I grew up, growing up poor in the hood, in the middle of nowhere in the desert, um, it was all about survival. But it was a different era. You know,
Mhm.
parents had 11 kids, so it was never calm around my house. And so you learn how to survive. Uh, you know, that I remember back when I was, as early as 4 years old. Um, you know, we were able to walk to the bus stop by ourselves, and that back then people watched out for everybody, so it was a little
Mhm.
different.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
we were by ourselves. This is the early '60s, so it's a different mindset of the country back then. So we had to learn to watch out for each other. And my brothers and sisters, most of them, they're a generation ahead of me, and so they weren't around. So it was basically my mom and dad that were just, you know, they didn't have a lot of education, just hardworking people from the South, Tennessee,
Mhm.
and they taught us work ethic from an early age and how to manage things. So we had to learn with nothing. So we didn't understand what having something was.
Mhm. Mhm.
And most
Mhm.
people, fortunately, especially in today's age, you can be like destitute and still have it better than we had it growing up. So
So you didn't
and
have a shower in your house until what age? A shower. You
oh, we didn't have a shower in the house until I was probably a sophomore in high school, maybe. But I had a lot of good friends because in the main town next to us, so, we went to the high school was about 10 miles away. So, even though I lived in the hood, my thought process was just different.
Mhm.
Um, I knew we were poor, I guess you call it poor, but in my mind, I just thought we were just broke. But when I went to high school, I had friends that I knew from kindergarten,
Mhm.
and I started seeing another part of life. Now, a lot of them weren't like wealthy or nothing, but they were considered lower middle, upper middle class or whatever, middle class. And so
Mhm.
when I go to visit them, I got exposed to quite a bit. And the
Mhm.
more I got exposed, the more I wanted to get more exposure.
Mhm.
And so I didn't have a poverty mindset. I never had it. Um, just because we were in a particular area, I was always looking how to get out of that. What else was out there?
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
when I went to go visit my friends, I would see things like, oh, they had two-parent family, they didn't fight all the time. They had showers, they had meals together, and
Mhm.
we did that as much as we could, but my mom was working. As long as I can remember, she was almost always working double shifts as a as
Mhm.
a as a nurse.
Mhm.
And she had a high school education as far as she got. My dad had an eighth grade education.
Mhm.
Got back from
Mhm.
World War II after having the ship sank in Pearl Harbor.
Wow.
And so, you know, he just had to do whatever he could to survive, and he started working as a trash truck driver back in the '60s.
Mhm. Mhm.
You know, actually, in the '50s, actually, '40s and
Mhm.
'50s when he got back, and that's
Mhm.
what he did his whole life. Worked as a trash truck driver to
Wow.
provide a living for us, and I didn't see him very often. And
Mhm.
then um, the greatest influence, though, was my second oldest brother, and
Mhm.
he was a Marine. He went to the Vietnam War in '67, and I remember it like it was yesterday. And for some reason, and he was 10 years older than me, but for some reason, he was very um, he was a loner. So in
Mhm.
the midst of chaos, he was a loner because he hated where we were, but he somehow gravitated, and I'm sure it was from him meeting other people because he didn't have any black friends. Most of his friends were white,
Mhm.
and he never stayed home when he was growing up as a teenager. He was always gone, and
Mhm.
he was uh he was just learning a whole different way to live. And for him, it was a pursuit of excellence. And now he went in the military in '67, and for some reason, he just gravitated to me. And I think it was to help make sure that I didn't have to go through what they were going through in the '60s.
Mhm.
And he was teaching me things on how to survive. And he was a black belt in karate in high school
Wow.
and never bothered anybody, but people would always pick on him because, this is the '60s and we're out in the middle of nowhere. And so he would get into fights, not by his own doing, but guys, the races, people would try to attack him in high school.
Mhm.
And he ended up, you know, kicking the crap out of him and just walk away. And our high school is about 10 miles from our house. And my brother would either hitchhike or walk or run to school every day.
Wow.
Like riding the bus. And so
Wow.
what that taught him was a discipline.
Mhm.
And that
Mhm.
discipline he wanted to instill in me at a young age. So at 6 years old, when he went off to war, he would tell me things like, "Hey, when I come back, and you get straight A's, and I'll get you a bicycle."
Wow.
Now
Okay.
he's going over to war,
Mhm.
and he was training as a Force Recon Marine when he first went in. That was his goal, was to be a Force Recon Marine. Why? Because that was the top of excellence in his opinion. So
Mhm.
it wasn't just to go and be an infantryman. He wanted to be a Force Recon Marine. And it's very
Mhm.
prejudicial in the military at that time.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
he always used to instill in me, uh, where you come from doesn't determine where you're gonna end up.
That's right. That's right. Mhm.
And just
Mhm.
because you come from the hood, that doesn't define who you are. And so that's how he lived his life. And so he
Mhm.
started instilling that to me. He would leave me books on the martial arts to, say, hey, I'm not going to be here if something happens. You got to be able to defend yourself. Now,
Mhm.
at 6 years old, he was teaching me how to take someone out, literally take someone out, because we live so far away from everything. If something happens, today we call it, let's call the first responders. No, you were
The
your own first
responder.
responder. And
You
so
right.
he started teaching me that stuff.
Right. Mhm.
And so that mindset kind of stuck with me. And so he was teaching me goal setting. I didn't know what any of this stuff was at the time, but it was instilling that confidence in me. And so when he'd get back, he would keep his word. And he and I, at 7, 8 years old, when he came back from non, because usually there's like a 12, 13-month deployment.
Mhm.
I didn't understand the gravity of the war that he was fighting.
Wow.
And
Mhm.
so uh, all I knew is he set a goal for me. I would work to get to that goal because he
Mhm.
said, "Hey, this is the bike, you know."
Mhm.
And so that's how I started subconsciously developing that mindset that if I put my mind to it, I could do anything.
Mhm.
And he taught me the confidence not to be scared. And we had a lot of stuff go on where I live, and
Mhm. Mhm.
people breaking into the house, and at a young age. I mean, it was a desert. We're in the middle of nowhere, so there was a lot of things. But the mindset is what I'm trying to get across. Is
Mhm.
I've I always adopted that peaceful mindset, in the
Yeah.
mindset of of invincibility. And in my mind, he was 10 foot tall and bulletproof. That's how I saw him because he was 6'3". He was a black belt. He was a bodybuilder, and he was a Force
Mhm.
Recon Marine, and he was an interpreter, so he spoke like 7, 8 languages. Because when
Wow.
they captured people, he's the one that would do the interrogations, and
Mhm.
so he was always learning new languages. And he
Mhm.
started teaching me Japanese at 7, 8 years old. He'd leave me books, and I started learning Japanese.
Wow.
Um, and so it caused me to grow up a lot faster than kids around me. But I was still a kid, but
Mhm.
we were poor, so there was a lot of things I couldn't do. And
Mhm.
then about uh, I don't know, 19, 10 years old. They'd been in the war for a few years. And what I didn't know is he had gotten wounded several times back then.
Mhm.
And it kind of brought a lot of stuff home to me. And then on my 11th birthday,
Mhm.
let me see, it was my 11th, just before my 11th birthday or 12th birthday, just before my
Mhm.
12th birthday, I was going to be going up to visit him. He had gotten wounded and got sent home, and he was recovering, but he was on maneuvers up in the Sacramento Delta. He's a frogman, so they're going to do underwater maneuvers, heading out to the San Francisco Bay. And I didn't know at the time that um, during his recovery, he was stationed at Camp Pendleton, and there was a massive riot, prisoner riot. And my brother and a couple of his buddies, they pretty much squelched that whole riot
Mhm.
and a bunch of Marines. So
Mhm.
they pretty much beat the crap out of a lot of these prisoners. It's very famous, made the news, major news, work, everything. Well,
Mhm.
he got an accommodation by the commandant of the Marine Corps from the Pentagon,
Wow.
and he didn't know at the time, but a lot of his buddies were jealous of that
Yeah.
because remember, this is the early '70s, '60s, early '70s. So there was still a lot of that animus, racist animus back then,
Mhm.
and so what happened during that time, he was on deployment up north while he was going to school at Fort Ord. That used to be the military linguistics school, and then he was going on maneuvers. Well, they killed him uh,
Wow.
2 days before my birthday when I was getting ready to take off to go meet him because I always used to go visit him on my birthday. That was our thing, and he was bringing me up there to come visit him. And then I found that out on Friday before I got ready to leave that he was killed, and that
Mhm.
changed my whole life. And I
How
became very, very angry,
very angry. Okay. Okay.
and I internalized that anger.
Uh-huh.
And I started thinking I had to do whatever I could do before my life was up. And so it caused me to get on this fast track, and I would do stuff that was um,
Dangerous.
dangerous, uh, not well thought out, you know, um, from riding bikes and going down cavernous hills, these steep hills on old beat up raggedy bikes going 30, 40 mile an hour straight downhill. Because after that time, I actually left California, went to Tennessee for a year and a half to just get out of California because I was so distraught.
Mhm.
And then went to high school out there in Memphis. And I didn't realize how prejudiced Memphis was. And, the problem was, um, you know, my brother didn't believe in the hood influence, the victim mentality. So, you wanna go and learn, you wanna,
Mhm.
learn how to speak well, communicate
Mhm.
because you need those skills. And in Memphis, you got a bunch of people that lived in the projects,
Mhm.
and I was an anomaly.
Yeah.
I didn't think I was, but apparently to them, I was. It was a
Mhm.
threat, and so I was always getting into fights. The problem they didn't know was that I was being trained in self-defense from a Force Recon Marine. So I got into skirmishes, but those skirmishes were very short-lived, and I started beating the crap out of a lot of these kids, and I had to earn their respect. A lot of them were in the gangs and stuff like that, and they had
Mhm.
guns pulled on me, knives pulled. This is like I'm 13 years old, and this was going on 12, 13 years old, and so I had to deal with that because out there, high school started in eighth grade, so all this stuff was happening in eighth grade. So I
Wow.
left there after a year and a half, came back home, started high school,
Mhm.
and it. I just had to learn how to kind of get back into life. And so I started to calm my demeanor to some degree.
Mhm.
And then
Can we back up? What made you make that decision to calm your demeanor? Because that's a total turnaround, and that's difficult for most people to achieve.
I decided that I was going to honor my brother.
Okay.
I was
Mhm.
going to live the rest of my life to honor his example
Okay.
because he was very calm individual. Deadly, but very calm.
Definitely calm, yeah.
And he was uh he was always misjudged by people. The guys that would
Mhm.
try to fight him, they'd follow him in a bathroom. 4 or 5 of them would follow him and try to beat him up in high school, and he would be the only one to walk out of there, and he wouldn't get in any trouble.
Mhm.
Um, and then my oldest brother was, he was a '60s radical. He was totally hood,
Mm.
and so he was the protector.
Mhm.
And so, you know, Floyd, my Force Recon brother Floyd wouldn't tell my older brother about all the crap that was going on. But my older brother, he was a football player, so all these guys on the football team from the hood would tell him that, hey man, these guys are trying to beat up your brother. Now Floyd has beat these guys up. He's left. He's gone home. And so these guys would try to follow him home, and there was another big riot outside the high school one day, and Floyd was kind of tattooing these boys up real good, and then the football players heard about it and went to the football field, got my oldest brother, who was half crazy anyway in high school, and he got all his buddies, and they went over there, changed tire irons and all this stuff, and they just started beating everybody up, that was jumping on my brother. And then Floyd just snuck off and hitchhiked on home. And so that's kinda how he was, and and all these stories I didn't learn about till later in life
Mhm.
after he was killed, and then I just started, wanting to adopt that mindset that I would let
Mhm.
nothing bother me, and if they did, I would try to avoid it as best I could, but I wouldn't instigate it, but I would end it, because that's
Mhm.
how he would tell me. He taught me, "You
Mhm.
don't start anything, but you know how to end it."
Mhm. Mhm.
Literally how to end it,
Mhm.
and so that's how I started living my life, but I wanted to have fun and experience stuff. And then the year I started high school out he in California, I was introduced to the game of tennis through a cousin. Never played it in my life. I was a baseball, basketball guy and football
Mhm.
prior to that point, but I didn't like it because of the politics that went on. Even at a young age, I found that out.
Mhm.
But tennis was a game where I could play, and it was single elimination. If I beat the guy on the other side, I win, I get to move on.
Mhm.
And so my dad wouldn't let me play on a organized team the first year in high school. So I hit a tennis ball against the wall every day, every day, every day. Lunchtime after school, waiting to get picked up. And I did that for a whole year, and I developed hand-eye coordination that was incredible. And then my mom sacrificed and got me my first couple of rackets, and I started playing
Wow.
tennis.
Mhm.
And I was at a high school. We're 60 miles from LA, in the middle of the desert, Antelope Valley Desert.
Mhm.
Nothing out there, and I was the only black dude playing tennis. And so, uh, but I never looked at white and black, and my mom never taught us that crap. So
Mhm.
I never had a victim mentality.
Mhm.
But the tennis taught me, uh, how to control my anger,
Mm.
'cause I had to be in control. And I was surrounded by a lot of great people, one of which was, um, my first coach, and they saw something, and I was raw talent, but I had to develop all that stuff. So I played JV for the first year,
Mhm.
and I made it a goal to make it to the varsity. But in order to make it to varsity, I had to work and get good enough to beat the guys on varsity to get a spot. And that's what I did over the summer. And then,
Well, I hope you really enjoyed the first part of this interview where my husband Ed talks about the origins of his what I call cool demeanor. Most of the time, he's very cool and calm and very collective, and I tend to be more impulsive. And so I was really trying to understand what was the root of it and what philosophy has, because we've gone through some major things as a couple. Both our children were critically injured. And pretty much through most of it, he's maintained very calm demeanor. So stay tuned for part 2 of this interview. God bless. My hope is that this journey has been fruitful and you're able to take it and apply it to your life. Until next time, tune in again for the Prisoners of Hope podcast. God bless.